Welcome to the CFO Hive podcast. Really happy to have Winnie Leung with us here today. Winnie's a phenomenal CFO. She's an FCPA, which we can get into a little bit what that is for those who don't know. And someone that I go way back with from our days at KPMG, where I started my career, and I think you did as well. And so really lucky to have you here. Thanks for joining.
Well, thanks for having me, David.
You were a longtime partner at KPMG. Talk a bit about your focus at KPMG, ultimately becoming a partner, working with technology companies. Tell us a bit about that experience.
Working at KPMG and really supporting companies and companies in terms of them wanting to, whether they go public or whether it's about financial reporting, that's where I gained a lot of expertise in supporting them. I helped them with respect to any special transactions that they were going through or wanted to go through, getting additional financing to support their growth plans, whether it was reaching out to the public markets, whether it's just, taking the company public in terms of a reverse takeover. Those were some of the special transactions that I supported during my journey at KPMG. That, gave me the experience to really work with a lot of different organizations. Now, I did focus mainly on tech companies, but because of my experience with public companies, I was asked to support large companies in other markets. It just taught me that, with my experience, like my background and just knowledge in public accounting reporting and public accounting, that I could really support other organizations in what they wanted to achieve and make sure that they were meeting all the regulations that are required for public companies.
Right, because I can imagine you would have seen like the whole life cycle, earlier stage companies growing really fast. So from startup to scale up to, raising capital, and then all of the things that are needed there to get to the next level, which for a lot of these companies was going public. I can imagine all of that experience, transactional, then the regulatory and being a public company, that's a lot of the transferable stuff for these other companies that, may not be high growth tech, but all of them want to grow. All of them want to, figure out how to raise money and, maximize their potential. So is that kind of some of the examples of the transferable stuff?
Absolutely. I mean, in terms of reporting and what's required in these registration statements that are required to be filed when you go public or in the reverse takeover, I mean, those are basic skills that anybody would need in terms of, supporting their clients or in organizations if they're looking to do that. I mean, you always have advisors, whether it's lawyers or accountants, but these are just basic skills that you could use, and that knowledge, carries to any industry. Now, there are uniqueness in terms of certain industries and certain accounting regulations that may apply to them, but generally overall, these are transferable skills. And so, my experience with public companies and registration statements helped me with working on other companies in other industries.
Were you in the ICE practice the whole time?
Predominantly, I was based in the ICE practice. I guess now it's called TMT. So,
okay.
But
so let's go. ICE is information, communication, entertainment, and TMT is now what?
Technology, media, and telecommunications, or maybe it's telecommunications, media, and
something like that. I liked ICE, and it had FIRE for financial institutions and real estate, which they've also changed, I think. But
that's right.
So yeah, you were not only ICE, you were.
Well, predominantly I was based in the technology practice, but I would say maybe 50% of my time was working on clients that are not within the technology practice. So it gave me a perspective of, industries that were broader than technology. Although my affinity is still with technology practice.
We had a great group there during the time I was there. So I was 90, no, I was 2002 to '06. So you were there before me and after me
you,
for a much longer period. But a lot of changes were happening at that time. I feel like there was like Enron and then this whole Sarbanes-Oxley, and that was like a huge thing with our SEC listed clients. Like the whole risk profile changed at that time. You talked about the tech boom. There was the conversion to IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards. Yeah, tell me a bit about how the world changed during your time there, and almost risk profile, and maybe business started booming as a result of that time as well, with some of that work associated with the higher degree of regulatory obligation.
Yeah, no, I mean, like you said, there was a lot of change. We had to learn about Sarbanes-Oxley and the impact of that. I mean, the regulatory agencies with PCOB and CPAP, arose because of some of the issues with Enron. And so just the expectations from accountants and public accounting companies were getting higher and higher, just with some of the things that were happening. But I mean, there's some positives to that. I mean, that helps strengthen the internal controls. And being part of a service organization, you have to support your clients in helping them with finding the best controls that are out there. I mean, not overloading necessarily controls, because that's something that normally when something happens, you always want to put more controls in, but you got to find the right ones and score, because you still got to run a business at the end of the day. So, learning about that and figuring out and advising your clients on what the most efficient internal controls may be was important. The other thing was, like you said, it was just IFRS. US GAAP's always there, and so you always had to know US GAAP, but IFRS was coming, and that was becoming the standard in terms of the policies that companies need to abide by. And so, helping implement IFRS. For the most part, a lot of it was, you could say, on the 10,000-foot level, was similar to GAAP. But, the devil's on the details. And so, helping clients really transition to that IFRS was important. And the other thing, too, in Canada, for those that are smaller, was a private enterprise GAAP, the PE GAAP. And that was another thing that we had to kind of learn and really understand and help our clients through. Because, like you said, there is a transition. For those who want to go public or want to be public, had to go to IFRS. But there was a lot of organizations, especially, for a while when, going public wasn't the thing to do. And there was a lot of organizations that were being supported by private equity sort of investments, venture cap, that didn't necessarily have to go IFRS. So you need to understand a lot of different policies out there in terms of what was available, especially for Canadian companies. So it added to the complexity.
I would love to maybe break it down, because I feel like a lot of businesses aren't super clear on the options when it comes to financial reporting standards. So just at a basic level, we talked about the International Financial Reporting Standards, IFRS, US GAAP. You mentioned private GAAP, I guess ASPE. What are the kind of general considerations there for business owners that are private? When do they need to think about going from basic private company GAAP and going to IFRS or US GAAP?
I think with US GAAP, I mean, the only reason why you would go US GAAP if you're contemplating some sort of US listing. If you're planning to stay in Canada and your main focus is Canada and Canadian sort of clients, and you're small, you're thinking of staying private, then there's no point in necessarily going to US GAAP or even IFRS. So I think those are just some general things. For larger organizations that have aspirations, or maybe have competitors that they want to compare to and they want to continue to grow, that's when either US GAAP, depending where their competitors are, or IFRS are considerations. If you're public, for sure you'll have to. If you're public in Canada, you'll have to go IFRS. If you're public in the US, then you'll have to go to US GAAP. So one of those two. So those are really your considerations. For the most part, IFRS is the basic. If you have competitors that you want to compare your financial results to as you think about expanding and growing, then IFRS probably is one of the main options you probably want to think about, as opposed to US GAAP. US GAAP, I would say, is really if you're thinking of going to the US.
What about M&A? If you're going to, if you're going to acquire a company, might you ask them to reflect their books in IFRS, or would you want to see that? Would that be helpful? Would companies that are looking to transact think about that?
I think it depends on the nature of what their target is. If it's a smaller target and they are, say, US GAAP, well, then the onus is on the company who's doing the acquisition to kind of make that transition from a comparable point of view. There's kind of different aspects when you look at acquisitions. One is, does it fit within your own model, your own business model? Why are you buying this company? Those are some basic operational things you got to think about first. And then the afterwards, if you're looking at comparable financial results and you start doing the analysis, then you can either do the conversion yourself and look at the big components of it that are different, right? And not necessarily have to look for a company that's the same gap or the same standards as you might be, because you can always do that conversion afterwards when you look at comparability.
So you made a move after quite a tenure at KPMG. A lot of people, I'd imagine, stick to that partner role. It's hard to get to partner, and once you make partner, a lot of people will take that all the way to retirement. You didn't. You made a move, and seemed like a good move as a CFO, but tell us a bit about that transition for you and that experience.
Yeah, when I decided that I wanted to pursue and look for other things outside KPMG, one of the things that I was thinking about was, one an organization that I could continue to learn. Learning is an important aspect for me. And don't get me wrong, my experience at KPMG was amazing. I learned so much. I met so many amazing people. The partners were great. I learned so much from them. And I love my clients. So that was one thing I missed, my clients and the people I work with. I miss those. But when the capital markets sort of died down and the banking, just during the financial crisis, kind of like starting in 2008, I didn't know when it would end. It was a fairly large one, and everything seemed to stop in terms of the significant special transactions, and in terms of M&A, in terms of people going public or even going reverse takeover. All that seemed to stop in all industries. So it was across
every. This was in 2008?
It started in 2008, and I didn't know when necessarily it was going to end. It seemed like it wasn't going to be an end in sight at that time. And so I felt that I wanted to, do something different. I wanted to continue to learn, expand my competencies, and I wanted to be part of, owning something and be part of implementing something. Being at the firms, you're always advising. You're not necessarily there when the companies execute. And I want to be part of that. I want to experience that. And so I started to reach out to my networks. And one of the contacts I had was a previous CFO of Q9 Networks. I worked closely with that CFO when we took Q9 Networks public, and had a good relationship with them. And so the CFO at that time was the CFO at Moneris, and offered me a position to be part of the finance team at Moneris. And although I wasn't given a specific mandate as to what, all I know was that, very typical finance team at Moneris was the last to know everything was going on. There was really a transactional based finance team. It was about, accounting was just just reporting the results. There wasn't necessarily there in terms of partnering and driving business decisions. And so no specific mandate. And I went about just trying to figure out from everyone, what is it that people are looking for from the finance team, and really, really changed, what finance was to what finance is, should be at Moneris.
Interesting. I love this as a takeoff to some other aspects that I wanted to cover with you. So you come in there, there's the more, let's call it backwards looking finance accounting function. But people in the organization don't probably interact with finance unless they have to. And they probably view it in a negative light, like it's a blocker to business, and probably have no idea as to the value add and how finance can be an enabler for the business. Right. So that's organization wide, I presume. Was, let's say, at the executive level, at the CEO level, were they also looking at finance that way, or did they have, a strategic partnership that at least at that level was operating?
I would say the CEO at that time had a very close relationship with the CFO, so I think that relationship was there. But I would say that's probably where it ended. I would say even at the director levels, and the didn't necessarily have the same view or relationship with the finance team, and so that kind of trickled down onward. So I would say where it ended was at the CFO level at that time. Okay. And so
at the CEO level,
CEO, CFO level, that's sort of where it ended. Like they had a really, really good relationship, but it didn't necessarily translate downwards. And one of the things that when I started, I just did a bit of a roadshow and I met all the leaders. So all the other directors, my peers, all the C-level, just to get a sense as to what is it that they felt was lacking or missing from finance, and what did they need to support. Very typical you might hear is that finance always says no to everything. You can't do that. And one of the things that and I was doing my roadshow and really listening to everybody was, okay, I need to change the mindset of finance. It's not about no. It's about, well, what is it that you need to do? What is it that I could do or finance could do to help you and support you in you doing your business better? And so after I kind of figured out what that was, it kind of made it easier to kind of transform finance and really be that support mechanism to the business, as opposed to being that blocker, like the words that you use too. Like, it's not about saying no. It's about how can we help you so you could do your business better. And you can focus on your words so you don't focus on all the details behind it. And so those are some of the things that, I took away to kind of really transform finance from being that number crunchers at the back of the office to really be at the forefront and be there in making big decisions.
In a sort of tangible way, like I think of budgeting as an enabler there. I presume they were doing budgets, but was that a big area of opportunity where having, finance interact as a partner to the business and building budgets and I assume that would have been a part of this transition.
One of the things in terms of driving or really driving change, I mean, one of the things is for me, I had to learn the business. And this was a new business for me. I've never been in payments before, never really had any clients in the payments sort of industry. So I had to learn the business. And one of the ways that I'd done it, and I'm kind of telling you a little bit about the background, just so you have some perspective, was I took sales training. The training that they give to salespeople in terms of how to sell the product and services. That was, for me, I felt the best way for me to really learn the business, like the pricing of how they price services. How do we make money? So some basics behind that, because you understand the high level, how things are recorded, but really when you're selling to potential customers, how do you make money? So those are some things that I took. So I took sales training and also took training for our call center operations team. So that really gave me the operational aspects of it. So it helped me better understand sort of, how do we make money as an organization? So those are some of the things that I did. But based on that, that gave me a better understanding of, how do we need to plan? You talk about budgets, and yes, there was budgets done. Some of it was at I'll say the top-down approach. The cost center was at that time was a bottoms up, but it wasn't necessarily in a way that was helpful to understand what people are using or what people are planning to do in their each of their respective departments. It was essentially a lot of times we're taking last year's and just adding 3% or 5% for inflation. But if you don't know what's behind some of that, then how do you know we should be doing it, or should we continue to be doing it, or is it even working to be doing it? So those are some of the things that were not necessarily done at the time when I first started at Moneris. That was one aspect. So really kind of embed finance people within the organization, each of the departments, to really understand what was going on. That was one aspect. The other aspect was really looking at transformation across the organization. When I first started Moneris, we were still doing expense reports on Excel and printing it and stapling your receipts to it and submitting to. I mean, that's a really simple example, but I hadn't done a paper-based expense report in I don't know how many years. And so coming to having to do that felt really, going backwards. So embarking on a fully digital transformation across the organization was important. So that's one of the aspects of doing that. And really, when we look at digital transformation, it wasn't just about automating your accounting functions, but it's really looking at end-to-end processes and how we can do things simpler. And part of that mandate was really about eliminating paper. It was a silly thing, but I said, we got no more paper. I was reviewing binders of, journal entries that were like, I think it was 4 binders each quarter that were this thick. So it wasn't something that it wasn't efficient. And we had done that actually and completed that in 2015, late 2015, early 2016, way before the pandemic. And so when it came to having to work from home during the pandemic, it was seamless. We were able to do that automatically. And so having the foresight to be able to do that was, really amazing for us as a finance organization and for the organization to embrace that.
And those aren't easy. I know that. I've seen them not work more than I've seen them work. But would you say, when you talk about throughout the organization beyond the finance function, so that's things like the sales function, how commissions are calculated, how they're reported, calculated, paid out, HR process. Are we talking about multifunctional across the board?
I would say for the most part, yes. And there was a little bit of uniqueness to Moneris in the sense that how we record revenue is not necessarily within the finance ERP because it's calculated outside, and then we upload all that information into it. So I'll say yes and no. I will say where it's across the organization was with respect to payables and expenses, where it's a very decentralized organization where a lot of different departments do their own purchasing and they get all the invoices. So we automate that process so that things are done at the department level because they're the easiest. They know what they bought. They know where it should be recorded, and then it's all uploaded. So we made it easy for them so that it's a seamless process. When we think about implementing system, it wasn't about taking your existing processes and automating that because that may not also work, and that could require a lot of customization in your ERP when you're implementing it. We just took a blank sheet of paper and really redesigned the processes to make it fit within the existing sort of ERP that we're implementing, so that it minimizes any customization that we may need to do. And so
Yeah, yeah.
taking that end-to-end processes, it makes you really think about, why are you doing things? Do you really need to do this? And it enabled us to eliminate a lot of things that were not necessary, and made you ask the question, why are you doing those things? Because people, human nature, where you keep on doing things over and over again, but not necessarily ask us those questions as to why we're doing it.
Speaking of human nature, I can imagine you walked in there and the team was kind of like, uh-oh, like, what have we got ourselves into here? This Winnie lady's come in here. She's, doing her roadshow, talking about all these changes, and people don't like change. So how did that journey, as far as the team, the structure, identifying where the gaps were, and how you bring everyone on that journey and get the right team and structure in place? Give us a bit on that.
In terms of team structure, when I started at Moneris, it may surprise you, but there was only one other CPA CA at the organization when I joined. Many of the team members they're accountants, and they're amazing accountants. A lot of bookkeeping, debit credits. We had a great accounting manager, but the team wasn't as necessarily as robust as you would imagine for a size of Moneris. And so when I went about, looking at, what my mandate was, or what I wanted to make change to the organization, I looked at the skill set. I kept most of the accounting team intact because they were doing their job. They were doing a fantastic job, and it was amazing. But where we needed to kind of really increase the competencies within finance was really in terms of at the reporting level, just to make sure that we were continue to be on top of all the RFRS standards. That was important. What we needed to improve was really in terms of, the forecasting, the FP&A sort of function, and bringing more talent there. There was really, at that time, only 2 people that were doing FP&A to support an organization. So it was a lot of work. And so really, and there wasn't necessarily, because there was a lot of work in terms of forecasting, they weren't there necessarily from a business partnering point of view, and really trying to bring in that business partner mentality to bring in new talent to support that, and really increasing that team. The other areas where we need to bring in some, more talent was really in terms of data. And that's where we built up the data team. Data, we had started to build up that team, I guess way before now, where the buzzwords really about data and analytics and AI. And we really had a data team there, which was supporting really just reporting. They're just getting insight. They're just getting some data, but there really wasn't necessarily the insights or the analysis relating to it. And so really exchanging that team to be at the forefront and really using data to be a competitive advantage and really support our business decisions, and really bring out those insights so that we could use data to do different things with our business. And in fact, we used it to help with COVID, determining COVID recovery in our forecasting. As you can imagine, Moneris being a transaction-based, and when COVID first hit, and everything stopped, transactions weren't happening because stores are closed, restaurants are closed, and they were not allowed to open. And so really need to kind of help the executive team, but also the board, see when COVID recovery was going to happen. It was a scary time back then. And so having our data scientists, our data team really support with that was important, and actually really, really helped with giving that comfort and giving credibility to our forecasting.
Wow. So all of this sort of shoring up on the technology side, like really prepared you guys to weather the storm when things like the pandemic hit or, economic downturns that resulted. I guess the hard step is making those changes when, you don't need to, you're growing, things are moving fast, you're kind of like keeping busy. It's very easy to continue to do the same thing, but to kind of step back and say, think about the future and the unknowns. Um, I guess that takes a CFO and somebody to come in there that can see, the forest for the trees. Um, so that's really cool, really impressive. And I think of you as really technology oriented. I've seen you talk about this a lot, AI. And I guess that's a good segue to AI and where things are going. And I understand at Moneris, you were collecting data that was really the opportunity there was sort of untapped. And you're collecting all of this data on people's spending. And give us a sense of how you understood that data to have value to support the business, and just maybe how AI comes into this whole thing, what steps you've taken with AI, what you've seen, what's coming.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things is we know data is king. Everyone's collecting data and using it to some sort of extent. But the hard part was thinking, what do you do with it? I know there's a lot of opportunities for this, but we almost need to prove it to people and let them see how this can really help them drive their business. If you build it, they will come. It's, like that field of dreams sort of mentality. And so I said, well, let's start out small and test and learn. Because it is a bit of an untapped sort of environment. We don't know what we don't know necessarily. And so it's really working closely with the team members to say, okay, what can we do with this data? And what kind of insights can we get from it? And how can we use it further? So as first we started, let's start internally and support our finance team first. And if it works for us as a finance team, then we can use it to show other people how it worked and how well it worked. And so we can use it for different aspects. So we started out with helping out forecasting. And when we used machine learning and AI, it was still, the early stages. And now they're more sophisticated models because the more data you put in, the more training you have, the more sophisticated a model that you could build, and your output would even be much better. But at the time, we said, let's start out small. So we wanted to predict, what our volumes would be going forward. And so that's how we started. When do we expect our volumes to recover from COVID? And let's just take a look at that. And so we looked at the models in terms of, what the model was actually coming out. And we looked at it and said, well, it kind of doesn't make sense. Based on our trajectory from, the past 10 years, how we expect with COVID, it's unknown because was never happened before. So we had to look at it and look at, what the next, year would look like. And if it didn't make sense, we'd have to make some tweaks to it because it just is no way that we'd have the same recovery curve as we had the growth curve from 10 years before because we're just growing. But then again, with COVID, each month we keep on learning with the recovery. And so based on that, it came up with a curve that actually, made, it showed that we're actually recovering better than we thought. And so it was starting out small like that and look at, our volumes and our transactions and what that was going to look like. And then as we built that and we got comfortable with that, we tested over, probably over a year type of thing, just to get a feel for it. And as it got a little bit more, I'll say accurate to a certain extent, more accurate, and we're more comfortable with the growth curves, we start applying it to different things. And we start doing a bit of a roadshow to other groups to say, hey, how this could help with what they're trying to achieve. So we start applying it to pricing and look at different pricing models and looking at elasticity in terms of, reactions. So if you have a pricing change for a certain group, as an example, how would they react? So again, taking a small subset and testing it to see how they would react. And the reaction was positive, then you know that, your pricing changes could be expanded a little bit more. If the reaction was not positive, then okay, you might need to tweak certain things and maybe not change your pricing. So start looking at that and then start expanding it to, marketing programs and the reaction to marketing programs. Like would the propensity to make a purchase of the service based on a certain marketing program and what the reaction is, again, using that data. So taking all this data into account, could actually impact, your business decisions.
Yeah, so that sounds like you were really at the forefront of much of what is now being talked about. I still think there's a lack of understanding of what this really means for either finance teams or businesses. They know it's changing. Just kind of stepping back from Moneris and more generally, what is your view on where things are now and kind of that transition to AI starting to really impact more broadly businesses that are, later on the adoption curve?
I think a lot of the buzzwords, because it's AI, machine learning, I think a lot of people get scared by what it may mean. It's a fancy way of, looking at predictions. It's a fancy way of how you use data. It's a fancy way of, getting the insights that you would have and how do you use that information to make business decisions earlier. It's just faster. If the machine can do it for you, then you can get the information faster and you can react faster. And these days right now, it is about reacting fast. Everything's moving so quickly. Competition's moving quickly. And the faster you can be at the forefront of certain things, the better an organization can be in terms of getting that competitive edge. I think for finance people, you got to take things slowly. I mean, we took things slowly. We didn't know what it really meant. All I knew was that we want to use the data. How do we use the data? You could use it different ways. And it could be starting very simply as helping with predicting what your forecasting is going to be and using hindsight a little bit and using some other data in terms of market trends and putting it together and coming up with, okay, this is what I think, the future is going to look like, at least in the next year. And you can keep on testing that. A lot of other pieces could be about automating things and how do you use AI to automate some of your processes. Some of the tools I hear about right now, and it's amazing how the tools have incorporated AI, is really about, like, if you talk about OCR, like, character optimal, whatever it's called, character recognition, OCR, that is a form of AI, machine learning to a certain extent. It's about taking what you have on a piece of paper, recognizing those characters, and having that automatically input into your ERP system or accounting system. That's an element of AI in machine learning. And so there's so many different aspects of it that I think you can chunk it down really to smaller pieces and just consume how your organization feel they can consume at that point in time. And then once they get more comfortable with it and everyone gets comfortable with it, that's when you can be a little more broader and do it across the organization. But a lot of it is going to be about your relationships with people across the organization, and that the trust that you have established with them. If they trust you and they believe that you know, like what you're doing, and yet they have confidence that you know what you're doing, then you can move through or implement certain of these technologies a lot easier. And I think that's really key, is really building that trust.
Yeah, super helpful perspective. I feel like just simplifying it, not making this bigger than it needs to be, starting within the finance function. And every organization has data, even if it's just as basic as historical financial results. Now, some of that may need to be reconfigured or cleaned up a little bit, but you've got data. And then there's, as you said, the external, almost macro data. And if AI can at a basic level just help you understand, based on what's happened, here are some things to think about prediction wise. I think that's a good starting point because that feels really tangible and less scary. And then
Right.
from there, the idea of building on that and then starting to take it to the broader organization to say, here's what we found. Let's bring this to your department. Um, I think that's much more digestible, less scary. So yeah, helpful. Moving off of AI and technology, which I know we could spend a lot more time on. Maybe that's its own episode down the road. So you made this move, KPMG to Moneris, had a long tenure at Moneris, a lot of change, a lot of growth. Did you ever regret the move from KPMG? Did you ever think, the firm and the client services was something that you longed for?
No, I don't regret the move. In short, I mean, I loved all the work I did at KPMG, and it gave me a great base in which it may help me be successful at Moneris. But I think I really expanded in terms of my skill set and my competencies being at Moneris. I learned how to improve in terms of my operational kind of finance sort of role. I took on new things that I didn't know or didn't necessarily have experience in. I mean, I took on treasury. I didn't know much about treasury necessarily before, but I learned a lot about it when I was my time at Moneris. I never implemented ERP before. It was the first time implementing ERP and gave me the experience to do that. But also, my background being at the firm helped me with, creating that process, improving that process, and looking from end to end. It's always about looking from end to end, not just about what to automate, what's in front of you, but really looking at that end-to-end process and where the friction is and remove that friction or remove things that are not necessary, and still be able to kind of provide the service and implement something that the finance team always did. So I think that was important. But also to be able to drive change at the organization, I think that was incredibly, something that was really important to me. And I'm very proud of it. Building a team, a great team of finance professionals that surrounded. I mean, that was something that was really amazing. And being able to teach them, be able to kind of, grow together and learn together. I think that was really something that I would never give up. And then being able to kind of develop new relationships across the organization. Being in finance is not always just staying within the finance core, but you always have to branch out and meet other people across the organization and really understand, what makes them tick. What are the things that they're worried about, and how can finance really support them in doing their jobs better? And so, being able to do that and meeting different people, I think really helped make me a better executive than I than I was when I first started at the organization.
Well, clearly things went well, and through your career, you've really, I think, established yourself as a leader. This was recognized as becoming an FCPA. Maybe some folks don't know a whole lot about that, but it's a fellow CPA, which is, I guess, awarded to the top CAs. Is it across Canada? What did that honor mean to you?
It was an amazing feeling being when I got the phone call that I'm successful in becoming FCPA. It's an incredible honor to be recognized amongst a very elite group, and to know that the work that I do within the finance community was really being recognized and honored. I do it because it's something that I feel is important to help the next generation of finance professionals coming forward, and really have that that platform for them to really reach out to people. I'll just say even though I had mentors and great people that I met with throughout my career, but not necessarily, it wasn't always easy. And I want to make sure that the next generation coming through don't have the same struggles per se that I may have gone through. And I really want to help them. And I really enjoy teaching people and helping people, whether it be something technical or it could be something as simple as just, looking at processes. Because, what we talked about before, if you've been doing the same thing for a long time, you may not be able to do that step back and recognize that, oh, I could look at things differently. And so having to talk to somebody about that sometimes is really helpful. And so I really, appreciate doing that. So it was truly an honor to be recognized as FCPA, and just really proud and of that acknowledgement and that recognition.
Yeah, phenomenal, phenomenal. I came across this group that you're a part of, and I joined maybe a year and a half ago, FEI, Financial Executives International. And this is a networking group for CFOs, and there's a lot of, as that implies, networking, but also mentorship. What I was amazed by is how so many of these individuals that have been part of this group, how many years they've been doing it. And I feel like, and you're on the board. Tell me how you got involved. Tell us a bit about the organization.
Sure.
And why you're involved.
Yeah, sure. So FEI, like you said, is a membership-based organization. A lot of it is about networking and meeting new people. It is about, continue to learn because there's programs that they have in place to keep you finance executives and CFOs abreast of what's happening in the marketplace, what's new, what things that they should be aware of, and what things they should take back to their organizations as well. So there's a learning component, there's a networking component, and also it is about continuing to give back to the community as well. So even though you're there to learn, but the more you put in is the more you can take out of it. And that's one of the reasons why I got involved with FEI. I joined FEI when I first became CFO back in 2014. I wanted an organization that I could, get some other advice on, not necessarily my friends. I mean, my friends are my friends, and we might think alike, but I wanted some different perspectives of things, and I wanted to be able to reach out to a network of finance leaders to get different perspectives, and so I joined that, and I became involved on the board, the national board, in 2019, and originally I started off as a member at large, but the year after I became part of or chaired the program committee. And the programming committee was there to support the national conference that we have every year, but also it is to make sure that the programming available to the members across Canada is relevant. So I became involved with that. But the more I got involved in terms of programming, I became more involved with different aspects. So, being co-chair in terms of the a bunch of the conferences, but also founded the DEI committee at FEI as well on a national basis. But besides being involved with the national board, I'm also on the Toronto chapter board. And so people who are interested in joining FEI would normally join a chapter, a local chapter. You're part of the Toronto chapter, David, and so am I. And so I'm also in the Toronto chapter and really supporting the Toronto chapter in terms of the mentorship advantage program that they have, but also supporting any sort of programming that they may have as well. And also been a mentor for FEI as part of their Mentor Advantage program.
Well, kudos, and I wish I had heard of it earlier. I think FEI is phenomenal, and folks who don't know about it should come check it out, because there are monthly dinners with great talks and events for both networking and learning. And I think we always welcome guests to come check it out. And I just think it's something that folks early in their careers should get in the habit of getting out there and talking to peers, and it's just a great muscle to develop over time. I feel like this should be taught at school. You know, the benefit and the value of building those networks early on. A lot of people only do it when they sort of need to network and they're coming into the market for a transition. But certainly, just coming across the folks at FEI that have been doing it for so many years, I think we've got to get the word out and get more people involved because it's a great organization.
Absolutely, no, and you're spot on, David. I mean, the friendships I've made for people across Canada. I mean, this is not just about the people in the Toronto chapter. You get to meet people across Canada and people from different backgrounds and different experiences. And I think that's important, is to really, have that connection with people that have different experiences, because it's all about continuing to learn and continue to broaden your mindset and broaden your experience, and having insights and different perspectives from people from across Canada is really helpful in developing your own career, but also continue to learn and think about how you do things differently.
Yeah. Well, we've learned a lot from you here during this episode. Thank you so much for being here, Winnie. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.